All right, who's ready for chapter 10? I am. All right, chapter 10 Jiu-Jitsu. Today, Uncle Jake took me to my first jiu-jitsu class. It was at a place called Victory MMA. If you don't know what MMA is, it's mixed martial arts. And if you don't know what that is, it's when the people on TV go into a cage and fight each other. I couldn't believe what I was getting into. I figured I was a dead man. When we walked into Victory MMA, it looked pretty cool, but also pretty scary. There were punching bags hanging everywhere, and 2 boxing rings, and a real fighting cage like the ones on TV. And then upstairs, a bunch of mats on the ground. In fact, the whole floor was a giant mat. Even the walls had mats on them. Awesome! There were about 15 kids in the jiu-jitsu class. Uncle Jake had picked out for me. They didn't look too tough. They were all different sizes, some bigger than me, some smaller than me. The instructor didn't look like I thought he would. He wasn't he wasn't a big superhero looking guy. In fact, he was not very tall and just looked like a normal man. He called me out onto the mat. "Get out here, kid," he said in a kind voice that makes you think you better listen. Uncle Jake was doing some paperwork, so I figured I might as well get out there. I took one step onto the mat and "Stop!" he yelled at me. "Take your shoes off, kid. No shoes on the mat." I sat down on the bench and took off my shoes. I walked out onto the mat. "Everyone line up," the instructor said in a stern voice. Takedown time. Winner stays, losers out. 2 pairs, get started. 2 pairs of kids walked out onto the mat. The rest of us stayed lined up on the wall. The coach shouted, "Go!" And the 2 pairs of kids slapped hands and then started fighting. But they weren't punching each other. They were gripping each other's arms, grabbing their wrists, pushing heads, and then suddenly one would shoot in, grab the other kid's leg, and slam him to the mat. I figured out quickly that this was a takedown. Whoever got taken down had to go to the end of the line. The kid that took the other kid down got to stay in and go against the next kid in line. Soon it was my turn, and I was pretty nervous, but I was going against a kid that was smaller than me. I thought I could definitely take him down. I walked over and held out my hand to the other kid. We shook hands. He said his name was Thor. I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes." "That's your real name?" I asked him again. He said yes, again. His actual name was Thor. I told him my name was Mark. Now that we were face to face, he was even smaller than I thought, and definitely smaller than Thor from the comic book. He asked if I was ready. I said yes. Then we slapped hands and started to fight. Before I knew it, he put his hand in my face, which kind of startled me and made me blink. In a split second that my eyes were closed from the blink, Thor was underneath me, grabbing my legs and launching me into the air. It took him about 1 second to slam me into the mat, and he was smaller than me. I got to the end of the line. The next kid I went with was bigger than me. We slapped hands, and this time I kept my hands up by my head, keeping him away from my face. He grabbed my wrist and started to pull it down towards the ground. When I tried to pull it back up, he let go and dove at my legs. Boom. I was on the ground again. The next round, Uncle Jake was watching. I got slammed again and again and again by big kids and little kids and kids the same size as me. And even though it was tough and I didn't like losing, it was also kind of awesome. These kids knew how to fight. They knew how to win. Even King Kenny would get slammed by these kids. And it's not because they are big or strong or fast. It's because they know something. They had learned this skill and they could use it. It is something that I could learn too. The next thing we did was called grappling. That meant that once we were on the ground from the takedown, we had to try to fight on the ground. Not with punches or kicks, but with wrestling moves and something called jiu-jitsu. But this wasn't like other martial arts that I've seen where other people are standing in line and kicking the air. This was like real fighting. And the first thing that I learned was that I didn't know anything about fighting. Ugh. Once you hit the ground in jiu-jitsu, the other guy is trying to make you tap out, which means give up. They would grab my arm or my wrist or my shoulder and move it to a place where it wasn't supposed to go. It would hurt for just a little bit, then I would tap out, and then they would let me go. I couldn't believe how good they were. I couldn't believe how even the littler kids could easily make me tap out. And once again, it was just because they had knowledge. They had learned jiu-jitsu, and now they could win in a fight against a bigger kid. This is exactly what I needed to stand up to Kenny. So my first night of jiu-jitsu was humiliating, exhausting, kind of painful, embarrassing, and completely awesome, because for the first time in my life, I realized that I could learn a skill that would give me the ability to defend myself and my friends from guys like Kenny. Freedom. Alright, so that's chapter 10. Chapter 11 is coming up next. All about learning skills.